Have you received a traffic ticket and don't have time to go to court? Simply upload a picture of your ticket to Elimitix.com and a lawyer will handle it for you. Need your ticket fixed? Go to Elimitix.
I'll say this. We saw some good, we saw some bad, and we saw some ugly this weekend in the world of Detroit sports, and we're going to talk all about it. I'm Chris Castellani. Welcome into I'll Say This. Even though we had two college football teams in this state with bye weeks, there is still plenty of topics to discuss here in the world of Michigan/Detroit-based sports, and we are going to talk about it right now. I was wondering where we can start because, like I said, there's some devastating news to talk about. You know, multiple pieces of devastating news, including my Tigers being eliminated from the postseason. But there is also a lot of optimism and a lot of hope, especially regarding the Detroit Lions. I like to start with the bad. Okay, I'm going to eat the veggies first, and then I'm gonna feed you dessert. Okay, that's what I do. I try to be humble around here. That's how we go about things. We are going to start with the negative, and that's the Detroit Tigers season is over. Now, of course, a ton to recap here from last week as the Tigers basically played a full series of games over this last week or so. And look, man, the season is over, and the season is over following a truly great series against the Guardians. I mean, it's one of those things where I can't separate myself from it because I am such a fan of this team. But if I was just watching it as an outside observer, I would absolutely acknowledge that this was a phenomenal series of baseball. And really, this entire postseason has been one of the best of recent memory. As kind of whatever as I was about the whole postseason expansion, like this is working. This is becoming March Madness. And I actually mean that in a good way. Yes. Do I feel like it kind of devalues the regular season? Sure. But you know what? The regular season had 162 games. I think you could argue to a certain extent, like devalues itself, like with I love it, but what some would consider oversaturation of games. Look, Tigers season ends. They lose in 5 games against Cleveland. What went wrong? And you know, it's hard for me to really say wrong when talking about a team that 2 months ago had a 0.2% chance of even making the postseason. But I think it came down to the fact of 2 things. Number one is that in the postseason, this is why it's hard to pitch in October. The more you see a team, the more likely it is that it favors the offense. I actually thought Detroit had a legit chance of beating Houston, and I thought they had a legit chance of beating Cleveland, and part of that was because it was a best of 3 and a best of 5. I feel like once this team got to a best of 7 series, which was going to happen had they have advanced to the ALCS, they would have gotten into some trouble. We saw them get into some trouble in 5. You had guys like Tyler Holton who were unbelievable all season. That's why when evaluating a player, man, sometimes like you almost got to take the postseason out of it because a guy like Tyler Holton, this team doesn't get to the postseason without Tyler Holton's brilliance. He really struggled. We only saw Jason Foley once in this postseason, and when he came in, he struggled. Near the end, they started to get to Brisky, obviously, in Game 4 with the home run. They got to Vest in Game 5. Cleveland's offense was just more equipped to get to Detroit's phenomenal pitching, and it was a pitching staff that for, 2.5 months was flawless. Every single night it was 2 runs, 1 run, no run. It was really incredible. They just fell apart. But honestly, the bigger thing to me, because Detroit had their rallies in this series. And of course, you got the big one in Game 2 with Kerry Carpenter. I mean, that was legendary. That was unbelievable, that home run off of Clase. And honestly, after seeing that, I'm like, we're winning this series. Like there's 2 things you got to do to really knock a team off in October. Number one is you got to get to a team's ace. Now, Cleveland, to their credits, I guess, Cleveland doesn't really have an ace. Their ace is their bullpen. They have multiple aces, and they pitch 1-2 innings at a time. And number 2 is you got to get to a team's closer. They got to this team's closer. And, you know, I didn't feel good going into Game 5. I didn't, just because I felt like they had wasted so many opportunities in Game 4 and what this offense was for most of the year. Even though they survived, and I would argue they even thrived off of big hits and late rallies. And guys, I wouldn't take back any of that. It was so much fun knowing that this team played all 27 outs, the number of clutch hits and home runs and comeback victories. It was as fun as a human can possibly have watching the sport of baseball. At the same time, unfortunately, that is just not particularly sustainable overtime. Eventually, you need guys that are going to consistently drive in runs, that are going to spark rallies, that are going to hit home runs. And this team, they battled. I felt like the approaches, generally speaking, were fine, but the difference was Cleveland, when it mattered, made enough contact, put enough balls in play, and then obviously you had Lane Thomas in Game 1 and Game 5, but especially Game 5, delivering the knockout punch with the grand slam. This was just not an offense that was deep enough to be able to do that. You know, you might have a guy rip a double here or there, or driving a run here or there. Of course, you got the Carpenter home run in Game 2, but for the most part, it was they landed many body blows, but never was it good enough for them to land a knockout punch. Cleveland landed the knockout punch in Game 5, and my heart broke for Tarek Skubal, who, I mean, I don't really know of anybody who's like angry at Skubal after that. The guy was flawless. Like for a month, basically, was not giving up runs. I felt like really executed his pitches for the most part, and then just kind of unraveled with the hit by pitch to Jose Ramirez in Game 5, and then obviously the Lane Thomas grand slam. But it doesn't take away from the season. It's one of the greatest seasons ever by a Detroit Tiger. He's going to run away with the Cy Young. It should be unanimous unless some voter is out of his mind, which has happened before. Look, how I feel about this season ending, because it is obviously it's not just bittersweet, it's hurtful. I said on my live stream for Game 5 that I'm more upset that it's over than I am that they lost. When I think back to some of the Tigers playoff losses of the past, even games that weren't playoff losses like Game 163 and 09, I remember being devastated that they lost. Looking at the rosters of each team, looking at the statistics from each series and saying, Detroit should have won. They should have beaten Boston in 2013. They completely fell apart in the World Series twice. They were better than the Cardinals in 06 and lost. And, you know, Baltimore completely just pounced them in 2014. They had a better roster than Baltimore. It didn't matter. It was still devastating to see the Tigers lose those series. In this particular instance, Cleveland was a better team than Detroit. Now, in the postseason, that's never stopped anybody. I think Philadelphia is a better team than New York, and yet we see the Mets in the NLCS as well as they deserve to be, right? That the sample size shrinks down. October is random, and October is cruel. That happens. At the same time, I was more upset that it was over. This unbelievable magic carpet ride of a campaign came to an end. And there was a lot of gratitude that I saw on social media from Tiger fans, and rightfully so. I'm going to say something that I've said a bazillion times, and people, especially people who are fans of other sports, might roll their eyes at this, and that's fine. But there is nothing worse than having a bad baseball team. When you got to stew in it every day, when you go into every game saying, how the hell are we going to get a few runs across the board? How the hell are we going to contain the other team's offense? And for 10 years, we were without the postseason. For 8 years, essentially, we were without hope. I mean, it was as bad as it can be for a professional sports team. It was bad to a point where, like, even their good players weren't that good. Like, we hyped up guys just because we were so missing having good players, and something just clicked this season. And I think throughout the first half, the one thing that I pointed out and many other people rightfully pointed out was, like, this team's got pitching. I mean, they got the best pitcher in the world. Reese also looks like a stud. The bullpen's been okay. It was seeing the young guys come together and perform in a way that was so inspiring, but also I feel like not particularly fluky. Parker Meadows isn't going anywhere, nor is Riley Green or Matt Vierling or Kerry Carpenter or Wencel Perez. These guys are pieces that are here to stay. And you know what? While he might not have had huge moments in the regular season, Justin Henry Malloy was a beast in October. Limited sample size, but that's the one to me that, like, I feel like people are overlooking. I think he's going to be a really good major league hitter. Maybe they platoon him. Maybe he only plays against lefties, but I know he can leave the ballpark. Had some really professional ABs. I mean, was an on-base machine in October. I said in my post-game video, what made this so special was that it felt like the beginning of something as opposed to the end of something. My hope is that one day we can look back and laugh at the fact that, man, remember how excited we got just by making the postseason? And I have a lot of Houston Astros fans that follow me from videos I've made in the past, and obviously the Tigers played them in the postseason this year. But you know, they kind of said the same thing, which is in 2015, after they went a decade without making the postseason. They made the playoffs. I think as an 86-win wild card team. Very similar, honestly, very similar, all the way down to having AJ Hinch being your manager and having a Cy Young winner as your ace, right? But they said we freaked out because we just made the playoffs and we beat the Yankees in the wild card round. And then a few years later, it was, well, now it's World Series or bust. I hope that what this team can end up being is the foundation. There are steps that need to be taken. Like, there's things that they need to improve on. This offense needs to get better, and this offense needs to do better job of driving guys in. They need to do a better job of hitting for power. Like I said, that magic carpet ride of those late inning rallies, as fun as they were, not sustainable. But I just feel so much better about the future. And I'm genuinely proud of this team. And I didn't shed any tears. I'm not that much of a pussy, but I felt a lot of gratitude and just a lot of sadness that it was over, because I had so much fun with this, and I know the fans did as well. And that was the best part of this entire thing, was just seeing the joy on Tiger fans' faces that we hadn't seen in a decade. So I will always hold the 2024 Detroit Tigers very close to my heart. And I truly do believe that this is the beginning of something. Now, that begs the very important question that I was asked about 800 times on the live stream that I did after Game 5. Are they going to spend? Is this where Chris Ilitch goes out and spends money? Is this finally where they open up the checkbook, and not the way that they did a few years ago where they gave Javi and Erod contracts with opt-outs? Is this finally the year they spend money? The response I'm going to give you is not going to make people happy, because there's what I want and there is what will happen. Here's what will happen. They are not going to spend a lot of money. Now, hear me out, because that does not mean that next year the expectations should go down. The expectations should be win the Central, make the playoffs. They will add pitching, as they did this offseason. They'll add a reliever. They'll add a few starters, whoever it may be. Maybe they bring Verlander back in a one-year deal. Maybe they go out and bring Flaherty back, Walker Buehler, who knows. But they will add. And I have complete faith, as well as everyone should, that this has become a pitching factory. They're going to get guys who are going to pitch here, and if they do what Fett and Robin Lund tell them to do, they're going to pitch effectively, and they're going to get big outs, and they're going to pitch meaningful innings. Offensively is obviously the question, and it should be the question, because the offense has really been what's held this team back in large part for the last several years, and it's, in my opinion, kind of what cost them in the postseason this year. They had opportunities in Game 4, and they couldn't capitalize. There is one position that I think they will spend on, and I'm not just saying this because I've been critical of the guy. I'm saying this because I have a brain that functions. There's multiple free agent first baseman on the market, and I don't think the Tigers go into next season with Spencer Torkelson as their opening day first baseman. I don't. And look, would it shock me if they did? No, but I would be surprised, because I think that what you've seen through the first 2 years of the Scott Harris era, and this credit goes to Harris here, is you are seeing a lot of his plan working. You are seeing him develop young players that are coming up and contributing. Torkelson, really, you can argue he's not young anymore. 3 full seasons into his major league career. He's got a negative WAR. Yes, he played 2 solid games near the end of the, or really 3 solid games near the end of the postseason, but he was 0 for 13, 14 to start the season, was sent down this year. And really, if we were talking about a guy who was in the outfield, who played a tremendous center field, like a Parker Meadows type, it'd be completely different. Spencer Torkelson got drafted 1-1 for one thing, and that's because he hit the baseball, and he hasn't done that very effectively at the major league level. Do I think he's going to be ostracized from the organization? No, but I don't think I necessarily think that he's going to be a cornerstone piece going forward. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like they've given him enough chances. The fact is, this organization is going to be willing to put up with another year of Jace Young development, another year of Justin Henry Malloy development, another year of Colt Keith development. And as frustrating as that may sound, when you look at what happened this year, like, those guys contributed, and we got rid of some not so good players so those guys could get called up, and they became part of the reason why this team made the playoffs. I could see them spending at first base. Third base is the one where I'm kind of up in the air. Do you make a run at Alex Bregman? I don't know. I don't think they will, because I think they run it back with Jace Young as their third baseman next year. I do. What I would do, I'd make a run at Bregman. Like, I would make a run at Bregman, because all I want is just a surplus of bats, the same way that this organization has put together a surplus of pitching. It just doesn't feel like you have enough. And I feel like with an offense that's struggled as much as they have over the last several seasons, it is an utmost necessity to get an offense that can match the brilliance of your pitching staff. And if you do that, you become the favorite to win the American League Central next season. I just don't think that they're going to do that. So I know that's going to bother some people. But as I just said a minute ago, to the credit of Scott Harris, This plan right now is working. Now, if a year from now we're seeing guys regress, then I'll be singing a different tune. But right now, the development is there. The young core is there. Yes, I would like to see you go spend on this young core. Christian Walker, to me, makes so much sense at first base because that's not a guy you're going to lock up for a 6-8 year deal. He's in his mid-30s, high floor, good hitter, gonna drive in runs. Exactly what this lineup has been missing and exactly what this lineup needs. I know people are bringing up Alonso. I feel like Alonso is gonna be a hard bargain, and I feel like he's gonna require a deal that Scott Harris and Chris Illich probably wouldn't be willing to give out, something, 7-8 year contract. I think with Walker, that makes significantly more sense. And then, of course, you add with pitching. Regardless of what they do in the offseason, the expectations should be what I said a minute ago, which is you make the postseason, you win the Central next year. In the first month of this season and in the last month and a half of this season, you were the best team in this division. It was that pesky 100 games in between where you really struggled. The one thing that we can definitely take away from this season is it wasn't completely fugazi. Like this was real. And there's something to build off of here. I'm immensely proud of them, and I truly do think that they are going in the right direction, not in a, hey, they won 77 games on accident like they did a few years back with Avila. These players aren't going anywhere, and they have a manager who's not going anywhere, and culture, man. I really think these guys are completely bought in. AJ has done a marvelous job. They believe. That's one thing I've talked about in the past, which is like the guys that the Tigers were pitching, not only were they like inexperienced pitchers, but they were inexperienced pitchers pitching meaningful innings. Like, I feel like that's hard to do to convince Brant Herter or Hannafy or Sean Gunther, like, hey, you belong in a pennant chase. And for the most part, they never blinked. So special team. And I'm at some point this week, it's going to be 6:40 at night. And I'm going to sit down ready to watch a Tiger game and realize that there's no game to be had, that it's over. And when that happens, I will feel a lot of sadness, but also a lot of gratitude for what we saw this year. We had a lot of fun. All right, let's move on to a team that performed not just admirably, but spectacularly over the weekend, and that's the Detroit Lions. Look, man, in general, most NFL games are relatively competitive. Like, even if it's a 2-touchdown game, there might have been a play here or there that kind of made the difference. This was one of those games, and I tweeted it out. I felt like it was early September, and I was watching peak Michigan football just boat race a MAC team. I mean, this was as thorough and as dominant an effort by a Detroit Lions team as I've ever seen. And do I think the Cowboys are kind of a mess? Yes, and they've got a lot of defensive injuries. Counterpoint, don't care. Don't give a shit. Injuries part of the game. Lions suffered a brutal one that we are going to talk about here in a second. I guess probably I should start with that. Like I said, we'll eat the veggies first. Aiden Hutchinson, pending a miracle, is likely out for the season. A brutal, what appeared to be leg injury. If you want to search out the footage, you can, but that thing snapped. And that is a heartbreaking loss, not just for what he contributes on the field, which speaks for itself. The guy's a game wrecker, just a quarterback pressure machine, sack machine. And it's so sad just because Hutch was having one of those years where it felt like we were seeing the beginning of his peak. And guess what? He'll bounce back. He's resilient, had a really serious injury in college in the COVID year, came back, finished second for the Heisman the next season. Like, this is not the end of Aiden Hutchinson's arc or prime. He's going to be just fine. But for this season, it's absolutely devastating. And I think in a lot of ways now, the ball is very much in the hands of Brad Holmes, because what we've said coming into this year and what we said last year is you need a second pass rusher to complement Aiden Hutchinson. Well, now you lost Aiden Hutchinson. And while the secondary has played a lot better and they forced turnovers, you got to be able to get to the quarterback. You got to be able to disrupt the quarterback somewhat. And as much as Brad Holmes has done a marvelous job of drafting, and as much as he loves holding on to those picks, and all that's true, and he's done a marvelous job, there does come a point when you are in win now mode where a switch has to flip. I always go back to baseball, and I bring up Theo Epstein in these instances where he built up these amazing farm systems in Chicago, and he traded away some really, really good players. He traded away Dylan Cease. He traded away Eloy Jimenez when people still thought that he was going to be good, and they got Jose Quintana, right? And while we look back on it and say, man, that was, I don't know if I would have done that. The fact is, when you are in win now mode trying to win a championship, you make those sacrifices. And this may be one of those instances in which the Lions, and Brad Holmes especially, are going to have to make that sacrifice, because it is a devastating loss. My heart's broken. I love Aiden Hutchinson, man. I mean, Mikey Sanders still probably surpassed him, but Hutch is easily on my Mount Rushmore, probably top 2 favorite Michigan Wolverines of all time. And I think, as I said in my post-game video, the last few years, we've seen a lot of excitement in Michigan sports, and we've seen a lot of excitement in Detroit sports. And I really think Aiden Hutchinson's ascension kind of coincided with that. I mean, he was a culture guy. He was one of the great leader at Michigan, one of the first people that, I mean, he really believed that team could knock off Ohio State in 21, and he went out and he did the damn thing. He played one of the greatest games like ever by a defensive player, and, sacking C.J. Stroud 3 times. It was, he's been an amazing part of Michigan sports. So your heart breaks for the guy, but this is where my mindset. I'm not going to say my mindset has. Yeah, fuck it. My mindset has changed a little bit when it comes to this stuff, because I totally understand Detroit sports fans having a very pessimistic view of of the world, okay? Over the last 5-10 years, things have not really gone right. And it was devastating seeing Aiden Hutchinson go down on Sunday. That's undeniable. At the same time, in the back of my head, I feel like this team, well, you don't replace Hutch, can weather this storm. Guys, this is one of the most talented, deepest rosters in the entire sport, okay? That doesn't happen on accident. That's the result of great player development. That's a result of really good coaching. That's a result of having a great GM. And losing Hutch is a punch in the dick. There's no way, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But did you watch the offense on Sunday? I mean, I know defense wins championships, but seriously, I don't know if there is a defense in football right now that is equipped to shut down this offense or even contain this offense. It's weapon after weapon after weapon and creative play call after creative play call. Ben Johnson was just in his bag on Sunday. I mean, that was a devastating offensive performance. It's something to be said about a guy who is very creative, and you'll have the misdirection, you'll have the trick plays and the rabbits that get pulled out of the hat, but then he'll just say, you know what? Screw that. Just give the ball to our running backs and have them run downhill. And the broadcast was laughing. You can't tackle David Montgomery if you tried. Optimus Prime couldn't bring this fucking guy down. It was fun. And watching this team play football is fun. And so as devastated as I am for Aiden Hutchinson, I came into Sunday believing that this is a team with Super Bowl aspirations. And as much as I hate that injury, I came away from today saying that, you know what? I still think that this is one of the best teams in football. I'm going to stand by that 100,000,000%. I was so impressed. Dude, just the way that they were moving the ball up and down the field. And they took their foot off the gas, and there were some penalties. They could have put up 50 plus. I mean, they just overwhelmed a team that beat you a year ago. And I know, look, it's a different version of the Cowboys, and it's sure as hell a different version of the Lions, but I think the big thing that we have seen with this Lions regime that we never saw is that the team that shows up in week 1 is going to be drastically different than the team you see in week 5 and the team you see in week 10 and the team you see in week 17. In prior seasons, Lions might get off to a hot start, and it felt like there was just never much improvement. There is improvement here. The secondary looks better. They force turnovers. Even though he's still struggling, Terrion Arnold, had a really nice pass breakup on a 4th down when the game was still, the Lions were dominating, but it was still kind of within reach. They made plays. Kirby Joseph with another pick, Brian Branch with a huge day. There's just so much talent here, and I think that talent will continue to shine through, and this offense is going to continue to be explosive and productive. And even though they never looked bad, the offense that we've seen the last 2 weeks is just, it doesn't even look like the same team compared to what we saw in the first 2 or 3. They're more efficient. They're not turning the ball over. They're not making mistakes. Goff has been accurate. They protect their quarterback, and this is with some injuries. You talked about the Cowboys being banged up. The Lions haven't exactly been completely fortunate with their injuries as well, especially the offensive line hasn't mattered. They just keep chugging. And honestly, I wish that I could break things down in a little bit more of an analytical manner, because I feel like with baseball, I do a pretty good job of doing that. But with football, to me, I just want to see entertainment. I want to see points. I want to see teams moving the ball. If you're on defense, I want to see you forcing turnovers. They're just checking off every single box. And I know that, again, the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since 95. Yeah, I think it was Super Bowl 30, the Larry Brown Super Bowl. They haven't even made an NFC championship game since then. But, like, you don't go to Jerryland and just shit pump them like that. I mean, that's the equivalent of playing the Yankees on Sunday Night Baseball and beating them 15-0, where they felt completely overmatched from the jump. And even though they're missing some key pieces, like Dak is still there, CeeDee Lamb is still there, didn't matter. An A+ 10 out of 10 effort all around. And it just shows how different this is, as an era. I mean, in what universe? I know the Cowboys have been inconsistent, but in what universe did we ever expect that the Detroit Lions would not only have the expectation of going to Dallas and winning, but going to Dallas and just pulling their pants down? I mean, they spanked their bare bottoms. You spanked that ass, Les. You spanked that ass. It's a quote from Tropic Thunder. Great movie, if you haven't seen it. One of the best comedies of the 2000s. Lions roll. Way to go. Yeah, man, I actually wish that I had more to talk about here because Michigan football and Michigan State football didn't play this weekend, so I don't really have a ton to cover. I guess in previewing the upcoming week, this is a huge Michigan. They play at Illinois. They opened, and we'll see if the line changes. They opened as 1-point favorites. Michigan is currently 24th in the country. Illinois is currently 22nd in the country. Bielema does a good job there. And they had Michigan on the ropes several years back in that second to last game before the Ohio State game in 2022. How am I feeling? I ran into my friend Anthony and former coworker Anthony Broom at the ballpark, who does such a wonderful job of covering Michigan for the Wolverine. And he kind of made a point of this team isn't great, but they might not be as bad as we perceive them to be. And the point that he made, which is true, is that so much of the criticism stems from the blowout loss to Texas. Well, Texas is the best team in the country. Judging how you played against Texas this year is kind of like judging how you played against Michigan last year. They're just bigger, better, and more disciplined than you are. Now, the Washington game was still a disaster, and it was still coaching malpractice that they even let Alex Orji start that game. If you want to hear more about that, listen to the interview on Chris and Company that I did with Tony Garcia. But, I think that this is the game where the line is going to be kind of drawn in the sand. Are they as bad as they've looked, or is it just the schedule that hasn't done them any favors? Because, Michigan doesn't lose to Illinois. I mean, I can't, in my lifetime, have that. 2001, did they lose to Illinois? Maybe. I know Illinois had a good team that year. I can't, they didn't play him in the COVID year. This is not a team. 08, Juice Williams against the 3-9 Michigan team. I remember that he went in and went nuts in 09 the next year. But we're talking, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it is a long time ago. If Michigan loses to Illinois, regardless of where they're ranked, it's typically a problem. So this is a huge game for them. I think it'll be an ugly game. I think that it'll be a low-scoring game. What Michigan needs to do with Tuttle, who I assume will be the quarterback as well as he should be, is it sounds so obvious, but this team doesn't win games where they make mistakes. And I bring up this team being undisciplined all the time because it completely goes against what the identity of Michigan football is. You dominate time of possession, you run the ball, you play good defense, and you don't turn the ball over. At points this season, they haven't really done any of that efficiently. They are coming off of the bye week. I do think we are going to see some improvements. Now, I know he had the 2 big turnovers, but I saw at least the resemblance of a spark in regards to what Tuttle gave them. Now, I'm not saying he's great, but I mean, by virtue of the fact that he can attempt and complete a forward pass, I think they might have something with him at quarterback. It's a Band-Aid for time. He's not going to be here next year, nor do I think any of these quarterbacks but something. Michigan State, they play Iowa, who's having, this is going to sound condescending, but by Iowa standards, a pretty good year. They scored 40 last week against Washington. I mean, Kirk Campbell, what are you doing that the next week Iowa scores 40 against that defense? Good Lord. I mean, Iowa plays to score less points than the other team. They're the only team in college football that attempts to score fewer points. But they dominated. Michigan State, I think Michigan, as this season goes on, will look a bit better than I saw them be at the beginning of the year. And I think Michigan State, while I think they might improve as a roster, in the early part of the season, I was like, this team might actually be pretty darn good. The cracks in the foundation have shown they were not competitive really at all against Oregon outside of a few turnovers that Dylan Gabriel forced. And we've seen improvement defensively, but I just think that they're too raw of a team. They're talented, but the turnovers they got to clean up. And Iowa is a team that they love to force turnovers and they love to play the field position game. I don't think it's a particularly great matchup for Michigan State unless they are able to really pop off some big plays early on with Childs and Marsh and kind of drive down the field and take an early lead. If they do that, then we're looking at the potential for an upset. But I think it'll be another. I mean, Iowa doesn't win pretty, so it'll be another ugly game. But I kind of think Michigan State falls short this week. I'm going to go with Michigan in a close game to win against Illinois, like a 17-13, 17-14 kind of game. I'm not going to call it back and forth. I think it'll be ugly. I think they'll get in the mud and start hurling rocks at each other. But I do think, as critical as I've been, I don't think they are at this bad. And look, Illinois had a good year, but like 4-3, 7 games into year one, that's a disaster. I'm sorry. There's no other way around that. That is not a good look for Sharon Moore. I think they bounce back. I think they win in a very, very close game. Okay, just a few programming notes here. Continuing to pump out the content and continuing to do the interviews. Look, baseball season is over, and I hate to keep you all in the dark, but look, I want to keep doing content. I want to do content forever. I want to be a content creator forever. It's what I love to do. It's my favorite thing in the world. I want to get advertisers. I want to monetize. I want to do all of that. Some of that isn't up to me, sadly, and sometimes life gets in the way. So I'm going to try to continue to be consistent with my uploading schedule, whether it's the post-game videos, whether it's, I'll say this, whether it's Chris and Company. And you follow me on Twitter at Castellani 2014. If a day comes where I can't upload a video or something, or a podcast, I will definitely let all of you know. There will be some changes, hopefully, I hope, some positive changes in my life going forward. And the last thing, and I talked about this in my last post-game video, but like the reception to what we've done, and I make Austin a huge part of this over the last several months, has been very, very humbling. You know, I have, you guys don't always see me feel good. I feel pretty good, you know, and I think we're starting to make a comeback here. And you know, you gotta hug the cactus for a while. And I think I did, and I think I have, but I hope that I've become a better content creator, but more importantly, a better person because of it. To Tiger fans, I mean, words can't express the love I have for you guys and just how much fun this season was, dude. And just seeing you guys so amped up. I was spending a lot of this weekend just watching highlights from some of those games, watching Scooball, some of the late inning hits, some of Benetti's calls. This is just the beginning. It took us 8 years, but we finally got to cover a good Tiger team, and we're gonna have the opportunity to cover a lot more. Like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. You find me on Instagram, ChrisCastle95. We're growing on TikTok. That's at Chris Castellani. So a lot of exciting things coming about right now that I'm really amped for. Look, we still got Lions, still got a lot of stuff to look forward to. The train's going to continue rolling even though baseball season is over. I love you guys so much. Thank you for everything that you've done for Detroit and everything that you've helped do for me. I will always say that you do way more for my life than I could ever do for yours. And also look forward to a vlog video that we got coming out. Austin and I went to Comerica. We got some good footage during the Tigers playoff run. So look forward to that. Appreciate all of you. Have a good rest of your day. Peace and happiness.